We always had like a 3-tier concept of what our show was supposed to be. It was supposed to be entertaining, it was supposed to be high quality, but it was also supposed to be accurate. Like those were the 3 pillars we felt like at the time. We couldn't find all 3 in another show. How's it going, JJ? Long time no talk.
I know. I feel like I haven't. Well, it's not that I feel like I know. I haven't seen you guys in person in like half a decade at this point.
Yeah, you stopped coming to the fun events, the ones that we go to and bringing the party to. You gotta get out of your home state a little bit more often.
Hey, look! I've been going to the You guys haven't shown up at the Fantasy Football Expo yet, and I've been going to the Expo the last couple of years. So that part's on you guys.
That part is on us, kind of, except it's August, and we're doing our big live show in LA, which I didn't see you show up for, JJ.
So that's on me. Where was my invite? I guess my invite got lost in the mail, buddy.
You have an infinity invite. Free ticket to all of our live shows. Okay,
that's good to know. That's good to know. I'll keep that in mind for next year. But yeah, man, it's good to see your face as always. Your smiling face. This is footballer number 2 on Late Round Perspectives. Had Mike on last year. Andy we'll figure out at some point.
Yeah, he's the dad of the show. He doesn't matter.
Just tell us your deep thoughts here, Jason, on Late Round Perspectives about Andy Holloway.
About Andy Holloway, I think he is a really smart, wise, old father. And so you want to listen to him and you want to respect him, but you don't. You know what I mean? It's just dad.
Right.
So, if I go real deep, it's a daddy issue.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. So, with Late Round Perspectives, I always want to kick things off with sort of like the backstory, the who you are. This is what I've learned from just listening to podcasts, outside of the fantasy industry for the last handful of years. This is what I'm supposed to do. So I'm supposed to talk to you about the come up, if you will. But I am very interested. I think a lot of people will be interested in how you are the way that you are today as an analyst. I mean, you can also talk about you as a human being, but sort of how you guys got to where you are now, what really sparked that interest in fantasy football, why you guys did what you did, because now obviously you guys are a behemoth.
Yeah, it's a fun, wild, crazy ride. From my perspective as an analyst, like to jump right to that part of it, I was a giant faker. I mean, just a gigantic, you want to talk about feeling like a fraud and a phony. That was how I got started in the industry. Mike and Andy, they were awesome, just unbelievably great fantasy players, right? We had our league, and they always knew their stuff. They were always in it. And our league of record, which has stayed since, I don't know, we're coming up on probably 20 years now. Those 2 guys, they worked with me. I ran a video game design company, and Andy was our COO. Mike was our audio engineer, and our lunches were just fantasy football. All we talked about, because we didn't care about the games we were making. We just cared about fantasy football. And those 2 guys were really, really good. And then they started doing some writing in the industry, and then they wanted to make a podcast. And so they did. They made a podcast. It was like, I think the end of 2014 or something like that. And I think they had it like a dozen listeners, if you include family. And so eventually they invited me on to be a part of it because they felt like they needed another perspective. From my vantage point, I was bringing 2 things. And neither of those things is fantasy football acumen, which is ironic to where we are now. I was bringing entertainment. I was a theater major. I was a comedic improviser my whole life growing up. Like that's what I thought I was going to do for a living. And then ended up becoming a business owner and a business manager and a marketing and directing and doing things where it's like so I was bringing business acumen and entertainment to the podcast. I was not bringing fantasy football knowledge. I'm like, guys, I don't know if I could do this. Yeah. And so because of that, I dug deep. I dug so deep and researched so hard for every single episode we did because I just didn't want to sound like a fool when I didn't know, who the offensive coordinator was for Team Y. And this was obviously a podcast from nothing for nobody. And then it started growing really fast and blew up. And I think it took me at least a full year before I stopped feeling like a phony. And now, we've done this full time for a decade, and I've applied everything that I know how to apply to all the spreadsheets and analysis and film watching and all that. So now, I don't know whatever you want to call just an analyst, an expert, whatever. I'm with you now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting though, that so it was sort of like, did you have fear, like legitimate fear when you first started doing like, did you, not only just from a business perspective, but if you're going in on something like you did and the way you guys did it, and you don't have sort of the acumen, or you think that you don't, whether it's an imposter syndrome thing or not.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Full blown imposter syndrome. But mostly because I was an imposter. So like, when you are the spy and you're the spy. But I didn't really have a lot of fear because, when we were starting out, like when I joined the show, they really did not have, listeners yet. It was nothing. It was like, it was, we were in the upstairs bedroom of Andy's son, just recording, feeling like we were late to the podcast industry at the time that we were apparently very early to the podcast industry. So, it was, I didn't have a lot of fears. I don't have fears of talking on microphones. Like I said, I was a theater major, a performer my whole life up to that point. I just didn't want to, I wanted to sound stupid as a human, as who I am, my brand, but I didn't want to sound stupid when it came to the knowledge. Because I think when we started this, we always had like a 3-tier concept of what our show was supposed to be. It was supposed to be entertaining, it was supposed to be high quality, but it was also supposed to be accurate. Like those were the 3 pillars we felt like at the time. We couldn't find all 3 in another show. You could find a well-produced show that was entertaining, but you'd lose your league. Or you could find a really smart show that you could go to sleep to, and so that was kind of what we tried to do. And I did not have the accuracy in before starting. Yeah.
I've always said that you guys did an unbelievable job. I mean, obviously you guys are great humans. I've said this to you every time I see you guys. I'm like, it's kind of annoying that you guys are so freaking, but no, I'm just kidding. Every time I see you guys, I'm always so happy that it was you who found the success that you found, because genuinely, we go way back. People don't realize that I was a guest on the Fantasy Footballers early on in like 2016. You guys had me on to talk quarterbacks, and it was the year. And I remember I called out Matt Ryan. It was the year that Matt Ryan won MVP. So I think it was around 2016.
We were long time friends, and Mike was a huge fan of yours. That's why you were on the show. He brought you on because it was, he couldn't sing your praises well enough.
Yeah, we had a mutual connection, oddly, with you guys being in Arizona and me being in North Carolina, and my brother's brother-in-law, who I'm tight with, he had done work with Mike in the past, audio work, and made the connection, and I obviously hopped on and I got to know you guys, and that's been, that part of it has been awesome to see. You guys just as humans, genuine humans, not some you put on this facade while you're recording and in front of a camera. This is genuinely who you guys are, at least, the many times that we've hung out together and whatnot. But on top of that, you guys just did a fantastic, amazing job at branding. And that's something that I think, people can look at and like maybe generally appreciate, but not to the depth in which you guys kind of went, not just with design and audio and the name that you guys chose. Like everything was so thoughtful. And I've always really appreciated that side of it. I don't know if I've ever said that to you. So I just want to throw that appreciation your way.
Thank you. That's it was intentional, and I think it was like I said, we all worked together for almost a decade at doing a handful of businesses, actually. Like it started in the MySpace world back when that was the main social media, and then I had a company that made all the backgrounds and stuff, so I was like more of a computer tech guy. Hired Andy, so we spent time changing industries. We went from MySpace to Facebook to mobile to Twitter to all these different platforms as the next one came up. And so, for 7, 8, 9 years, we were just running a business. We had, morning meetings where we're talking about color schemes. We're talking about SEO. We're talking about these things. And then all of a sudden we put this podcast together and it was treated the same. We started it from day one, from moment one, as a business.
Right.
It was our passion. It was our hobby.
Right.
It was fun, but we took it seriously from like every decision was purposeful and meaningful and like meant to be like, how can we help this podcast succeed so we could do this for a living?
Yeah. That's something that people just don't really get and understand in general, like especially within the space. This space is one where there's a lot of smart people and a lot of smart analysts. And it's just that like little push that they need that they're not fully seeing necessarily from like a marketing end and a marketing angle and perspective, whether it's design, whether it's quality. I mean, even myself, like from an audio quality standpoint, I've had to like learn things and figure things out and kind of, work my way with that. But having that backbone for you guys, and you guys coming from like different backgrounds and stuff, had to have been really, really helpful.
It was a magical sweet sauce because we all three brought something both important and different. My business acumen and entertainment, that's what I felt I brought to the table. Mm-hmm. Mike was an audio engineer. He knew how to make everything, all of our sound drops, all of our music intro was, that was him playing on the guitar, the quality of the audio. Andy was a website designer. He knew how to make the web, how to get SEO, how to do that stuff. So it was like we all three came together and just it allowed us to be entrepreneurs and hobbyists at the same time.
Yeah. And then you mesh so well, obviously, on the podcast itself. And that obviously, just doing so many reps and having as many episodes as you guys have done, it gets easier and easier, although you probably get more and more angry with them at times, and openly angry at them with more reps too.
Yeah, I mean, we hate each other. That's the big thing on the show. If you watch our show, you could see behind the scenes, like we we don't like each other. No, we get along great. It's easy. The chemistry has always worked out, and we've really never had big fights. Like our biggest fights over the 2 decades we've worked together are like fantasy football. Like we had a big fight over Deebo Samuel versus Brandon Ayuk a couple of years ago, and it was like I think that lasted 2 days. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say, is it a pickleball fight as opposed to a fantasy football fight?
Yeah. Pickleball's, I guess, gotten contentious because we're all competitors to the max, but we do get along.
I feel you. All right, let's move on to some fantasy talking points and discussion. Drafts are mostly over at this point. Technically, when this drops, the season has already started, so we won't be talking about the Thursday night game. But I have to ask, what do you think is the biggest mistake that drafters made this summer? This could be a player take, a strategy-focused thing. What do you think people got wrong this year? Because I feel like we're always talking about like the thing to do as opposed to the thing not to do.
Yeah, I'm really curious about this one. I feel like it is wrong strategy this year to not have grabbed one of those top 5 tight ends. Mm-hmm. I think the tight end landscape has changed this year over the last, while it was, there's usually 1 or 2 main tight ends. And now with the breakouts of some of these young guys, with Kincaid's opportunity, obviously Laporta on the field and McBride. And now you've got kind of a handful of guys that I think will separate themselves from your average tight ends or from your streaming tight end, and they're not costing you an arm and a leg either. Like It's not like you're having to spend last year's 5th overall pick to get Kelsey to have that positional advantage. So that's like my biggest curiosity. I've been saying it in most of my drafts, certainly not all, but most of my drafts, I'm trying to get one of those top 5 guys, and I'm trying to get, the cheapest one I can, play that game, risk a little bit. But it feels like a mistake if you are going into the season with, Freiermuth or even some of the higher end lower guys like a Ferguson, who's fine, but like the opportunity cost in the 4th and 5th rounds, they're not as much as they used to be for what could be a positional advantage.
Yeah, the other thing too is like it seems like people are just drafting off of projection, if you will, with these tight ends, right? So like Travis Kelce not going as high as he went historically because of what he did last year, and then us projecting, he's going to do X, Y, and Z because he's 35 now and all that. But I mean, I think that we would probably, if we were to place bets on which tight ends could give us that like difference making season, we would place bets on some of those higher end top 5 tight ends. Like we would say top 5, top 6, however deep you want to go. But, we would say, okay, yeah, projection wise, Trey McBride looks like Travis Kelce, who looks like Sam Laporta, who looks like Mark Andrews or Dalton Kincaid. But one of these guys is probably going to come out on top and have maybe that like 16 PPR point per game season where we're like, man, that guy's really giving you that edge. Is that kind of in the back of your head as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I think specifically with McBride and Kincaid, those two guys, tied to good quarterbacks, they're super young, super athletic. They're just starting to break out, and they haven't done it yet. I mean, you can argue McBride definitely did it the second half of last year, but since it was half a season, he's not being valued like he could be the number one guy.
Right.
And so I think those two players are the ones where it's not just a median projection. It's I hope they just hit. And next year, they're first round type picks.
Yeah, it's crazy too, man. Like I wrote about this in my draft guide, but like literally every tight end spot in the top 6 and 7 or 7-ish, based on what we saw from 2014 to 2023 versus 2024, every ADP slot, so the tight end 1 slot, the tight end 2 slot, is lower than what we've seen historically. Like every single one has been pushed down, and it has everything to do with what happened last year. Last year, you get all these breakout tight ends, these guys coming out, off waivers in the late rounds, and you get Travis Kelce disappointing as the tight end 1 in PPR points per game. You have this like perfect storm for tight end value this year. So I think it's a really, really good call out. Let me ask you this. Have you been going RB in any drafts? Like have you double tapped the position at all?
I have. I'm not a huge fan of like most of the early round 2 wide receivers.
Yeah.
I would love to get my hands on like, a CD or Tyreek if I'm blessed with the drafts, slot. But if I'm near the end of the first, oftentimes I'll take that other running back I believe in over the Olave,
right?
The tier. Marvin Harrison. I'm a Cardinals fan. It's exciting. I want him on my team, but also like, man, that's pricey for what he has to do to pay off of that value. So there have been drafts where I double tap the running back.
Yeah, I did it. I did this past weekend. It felt like in more, home leagues, casual leagues, you kind of had to do that if you were in the back half of the draft or like at the tail end of the first round, just because you knew that. I mean, people are going to go crazy at running back in that kind of format. And be a little bit scared, more afraid to go zero wide or zero RB.
You also, I think, there's that gap between those big guns in the first round, and then to that tier I'm talking about with like the Olaves, the question marks with London, he could be great,
right?
But then you look at who's there a couple rounds later, and you're like, oh, those are they really that? Are they in the third and fourth round? Are they really that different than the second round wide receivers? Like there's kind of a big tier there, so I feel like the value is there.
Yeah, like is anyone going to be shocked if Amari Cooper outscores Drake London this year?
Right, exactly. Or is it Cooper Kupp or Puka? Cooper Kupp could absolutely outscore Puka this year.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Let's talk about quarterback. So the quarterback landscape, this is something that we've definitely witnessed over the last 4 or 5 years, basically since that Lamar Jackson MVP season. But it seems like it's mathematically this has been happening. It doesn't just seem this way, but the quarterback position has become more efficient. This year in particular, ADP seemed pretty efficient where it wasn't totally obvious what direction to necessarily go. We're all going to have our favorites and whatnot. But my question to you is, who is your favorite or who was your favorite who could really outpace ADP this year? And do you think that there was a non-top 12 quarterback, a late round dart throw that will end up being in the top 12 this year? Because you look at the mobility side of things, we know that quarterback rushing matters, but the market now recognizes that and they're pushing those guys up, and it makes it a lot more difficult to be like, yeah, I'm just going to wait for Lamar Jackson in the 12th round and I'll be fine.
The good old days.
Yeah, the good old days.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kyler's one of the best values, although he's come up over the, you look at like 1 month ago when drafts were starting in August, he was 7th round, 8th round. He was like that 7-8 turn. Now, he's going up a couple more rounds, but I think he should. I still think he's a good value there. Right. I think the best value in the draft when you're trying to take that late round shot, and I would guess most people agree, is Jaden Daniels, just because you got the dual threat ability, very similar to Kyler, playing with Cliff Kingsbury, rookie year, where Kyler was the quarterback 7 his rookie season. And if you're talking like late round guys, really late, maybe 2 quarterback leagues or whatnot, there's a handful of people you just look like. I've never been like the most bullish Trevor Lawrence believer. Yeah. I thought he was a little overhyped coming out of college, and he has, I think, disappointed for what the hype was supposed to be. But at the same time, he's still young. He's got a lot of things that happened last year, just so many missed touchdowns. The videos are everywhere. The amount of toe taps on the white line. He had a bunch of injuries last season. So, another year in the NFL, what seems like a good offense. If you're looking for like that Jordan Love breakout where he was drafted, in like quarterback 20. Right now, I think Trevor Lawrence has dropped pretty far. I think last I saw he was like quarterback 17.
Yeah.
And if you say who could make that leap up there, I think he's in the mix. And then super late dart throws like Stafford could just have another great season where he's got passing touchdown efficiency that he's had in the past. If he's got a healthy Cooper Kupp and Cooper Kupp and Puka together, two quarterback leagues. But those are kind of my main guys. I want Kyler or Jaden. Like that's my go-to.
Yeah, same. The way that I've kind of viewed the quarterback position this year too, and I called out Brock Purdy as a fade in the draft guide, mostly because he was like the top of that giant pocket passing tier, and he's always the kind of the first guy that goes in that grouping, right? And my argument really comes down to the fact, like, obviously he has great weapons. Obviously it's a great system. I'm not going to be shocked if he's, a low-end QB1 or something like that. But the argument is sort of, do you think the ceiling outcome for a player like Brock Purdy is significantly different than a player like Matthew Stafford at the end of the day?
No, certainly not. I mean, can they both throw for 4,500 yards? Yeah. Can they both throw for 30-plus touchdowns? Yeah.
Right.
And if neither one of them's adding something on the ground, the value difference between grabbing Purdy early or him late, whenever you've got the pocket passing guys, the value of where you're taking them in drafts really, really matters to me. Like everyone in the world and their moms love CJ Stroud. I love CJ Stroud, but he just seems like such a bad value when you've got like multiple rounds later, you're hoping CJ Stroud turns into like what Joe Burrow has already been.
Yep.
It's like, oh, well, why don't I just get what Joe Burrow's, 3 rounds later, I'll just grab him if I want one of those pocket guys or something.
There's so much variance with passing numbers. I mean, like the easiest example is, you throw an 80-yard bomb to the 1-yard line and then you run it in. Okay, well, that touchdown all of a sudden is not yours.
Mm-hmm.
That 1-yard touchdown counts more for that running back in fantasy than the 80-yard bomb does. That's just to show you the crazy variance that we see, with like touchdown rate and a metric like that. Something so simple as just touchdowns divided by attempts. And, I actually looked at this in the draft guide as well, where if you look at top 6 quarterbacks who are pocket passers, so CJ Stroud being that this year for, generally speaking, based on ADP, and you look at high-end QB2s, so the Goff range, just these pocket passers that go there, chances are, if you were to draft, just probability-wise, if you were to draft 2 high-end quarterback 2s on your team, one of them, just based on probability, will outscore CJ Stroud this year. And it has everything to do with the fact, and I'm not saying that's going to go down because obviously Stroud could just have a great year. I'm just saying based on what's happened historically. And that just, it's because of the variance that we see with passing numbers. So Stroud has been someone that I think we all root for and like as a player. It's just really, really hard to back that when you got a guy like Kyler often going after him, or, even Anthony Richardson where he's going, and these guys who just have massive ceilings with what they can do on the ground.
Yeah, I completely agree. Unless your name's Patrick Mahomes, I think, you're gonna have to prove it. And even obviously Mahomes had a down year last year, although I do think he bounces back in a major way this season.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you there. This episode is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. If you haven't played over at Underdog yet, now's the perfect time. There are tons of different best ball leagues that you can join, and there's definitely a league out there that fits what you're looking for. And you can use all the things that I've talked about with guests on becoming a best ball bro to crush those drafts. But like I said, now's the right time to join up. Because if you go and you sign up and use promo code LATEROUND, you not only get a nice deposit offer, but you also get a free late round draft guide. That's a $25 guide emailed to your inbox after signing up for absolutely free. So head to underdogfantasy.com, sign up using promo code LATEROUND, and make a deposit. I can confirm it's a really, really fun platform to play on. Now back to the show. All right, going back to the first round. So you talked about the second round a little bit and how you have these wide receivers that you really couldn't confidently back because there were just so many of them that were basically the same. Were there any first round picks that scared you this year or that you're looking at still to this day and you're like, man, I could really see how this could go south for him?
Yeah, there is. And I hate that you're asking this question because I don't want to be the one that says it out loud. It's like, but the honest truth is, like, every time I'm scared. I think I had like the 8th or 9th pick in a mock the other day we were doing, and this guy fell to me, and I felt backed into taking him, but I still wasn't sure, and he might be the greatest wide receiver in the NFL. It's Justin Jefferson.
Yeah,
he scares the tar out of me. I mean, we have history of world-class first ballot Hall of Famers like Larry Fitzgerald. He had in his prime had a stretch where he didn't have a good quarterback. He went from a quarterback to not pre-Kurt Warner, and he wasn't that great. It was like wide receiver 20, wide receiver 30, wide receiver 40, I think, one year. And it wasn't that he wasn't a great all-world wide receiver. Is Garrett Wilson bad? Because he was bad last year.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of now I'm putting a lot of trust into Sam Darnold, and it feels like I'm not allowed to say that Justin Jefferson can have a bad season because he's just so darn good. My rankings, I've still got him up there. I think he's going to get 1,500 receiving yards, but the touchdowns, man, if he finishes the season with 4 or 5 touchdowns, you are going to be disappointed no matter how many yards he gets. And he's got Sam Darnold for at least the beginning of the season, and then maybe worse than Darnold, throwing him the ball the rest of the way. So he's just scary to me. The variance of bad quarterback play is one that worries me for a first round pick. Like, none of the other guys there have that. None of you don't worry about Dak or Burrow or even Tua.
Right.
You don't worry about these quarterbacks. One of them is Sam Darnold, is the quarterback of the first round wide receivers. So I'm always gun shy there.
You're banking on scheme at the end of the day, which I get, right? But it's also frightening. Like, there's a real chance that things do not go as planned in Minnesota this year. And I like on one side, I'm like, oh, I could see how, a guy like Sam Darnold can thrive in this offense and they'll be totally fine. But then on the other side, I'm like, yeah, people are probably overstating the Nick Mullins splits last year whenever they played teams like Detroit, and he was able to, put up massive numbers of yards and points because they're facing inferior competition. They're not going to see that week in and week out. Now, I probably have leaned more on, just because it's been easier from like a Darnold perspective of like, if you're in a super flex league and you can get him as a QB3 or something like that and just take the chance, that's fine. But I think it's valid to feel that way about Justin Jefferson, knowing that, there are at least other very, very secure options that are going, in round one that you're drafting him over. And so if you want to go in another direction, I think it makes sense.
I think A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, those guys, I have seen plenty of drafts where Justin Jefferson gets taken ahead of those two. Mm-hmm. Those are the two where I'm just, I can't swallow that pill. I can't say, look, Amon-Ra is as solid and as protected and as safe as it comes. Why would I take the risk? When I look at the upside of Justin Jefferson, can he finish as the wide receiver 1 this year? No, he can't. No world does Justin Jefferson finish as the wide receiver 1 with Sam Darnold and a hodgepodge of quarterbacks throwing on the ball. I don't think he can get the touchdowns.
Yeah, I like the A.J. Brown call out too, because I think a lot of people have Brown probably in the next tier. But I like him too. And this Kellen Moore offense should run more plays. Is that sort of the thesis for you? That look, obviously AJ Brown is AJ Brown, but is it also this environment change for him a little bit?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish and hopeful and a little worried for the Eagles offense. I think Kellen Moore coming in, they took that gamble, right? They went to the Super Bowl. They lost their coordinators. They said next man up.
Yeah.
But those guys hadn't done the job yet, and they did a poor job at it. And so they got rid of them and said, you know what? Let's get some experienced guys in here. And they brought in I think a good offensive coordinator, good defensive coordinator, it's going to help. The scheme got so boring last year. You look at the first half of the year, it was like A.J. Brown was a manimal. He was just, breaking records for 125-yard games, and then nothing changed. They dumbed it out. You listen Kelsey talking about how they just had to really simplify the offense, and it got too simple on offense, and it seemed like everyone figured the Eagles out, and obviously A.J. Brown had a pretty poor second half of the year, but I think if you get a good scheme, get guys, into succeeding areas more, he's too good to be, Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, I'm going to trust the talent of those players to be able to work with a Kellen Moore and be good for fantasy.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've had Devontae Smith too as a target this year. I think that when you get an offense that has proven to be good with the personnel they have, and you're injecting the potential for a little bit more pace, some more plays run in that offense, and the target distribution is mostly going to two guys. Maybe you want to throw three if you want to throw Dallas Goedert in there, but mostly these two guys. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a definite argument to be made that Brown himself has been undervalued and that you could, go with him. So if, like in a draft, if you're facing AJ Brown versus Justin Jefferson, you're leaning AJ Brown.
I would take AJ Brown every time. Yeah.
I mean,
that. if I'm playing against, like, I'm thinking about some, week one matchup or, week whatever matchup, and I'm playing against the guy who has Justin Jefferson or AJ Brown. AJ Brown scares me more. Who could have 2 touchdowns more realistically and just nuke my week?
Yeah.
More than likely, I think it's Brown.
Yeah. I like that call. I like it. So look, I do late round perspectives largely because I like to get other perspectives on the show to kind of look at what I've said throughout the week and call me an idiot, right? I want people to trash my takes and say that I'm really bad at this.
Yeah. So, well, you are pretty bad at this.
So. Trust me. I mean, you think that you were fooling people the first year that you were doing analysis. I've been doing it for 12 years now.
Yeah, no, and to do the opposite of that, I think you are one of the best analysts in the entire industry and also a great person. Just we love you, JJ.
Thank you. I love you, even though you guys are indeed losers, as I said.
That is true.
As I said in my MVP call. Look, I knew you were going to throw out the old school picture of me as you guys did last year.
Yeah.
And this is now in its perpetual cycle. For those of you who don't know, the footballers do their MVP show each year. They ask me to give my MVP. Last year, my MVP that I could have called out Rachaad White. I loved Rachaad White last year, but no, I decided to go on the show and say to draft Tony Pollard, and there's egg on my face. But last year when I did it, I think last year I called you nerds, and then you guys had the bowl cut picture of me from when I was like 9,
a little baby picture,
little chubby JJ. And this year I called you losers, and you still had that picture. But I feel like we're in this perpetual cycle now where one of us has to stop for the other, for the name calling.
Yeah,
we'll have to stop, but
it's never gonna stop. We're gonna have to find more pictures. We're gonna have to call Mama Zacharison and find some dirt.
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely some more bowl cut pictures out there in the universe. But yeah, first off, I really appreciate those kind of words. It means a lot, especially coming from you. But I want people to come on to, again, just give a different angle and perspective on some of the things that I'm feeling and saying and researching, on this show. One of those things on the 15 Transaction Show this week was the Denver Broncos backfield. It's really strange that I've bought into both of these running backs in the offense because, historically, we don't see really monster seasons from running backs with rookie quarterbacks. There's 2 of them. This isn't like a very obvious bell cow situation. We know that Sean Payton splits his backfields up, but I can't get away from how Sean Payton deploys his running backs and how he uses them in the passing game. Am I crazy for thinking that both of these guys, Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, especially with, Audric Estime's there, they kept Blake Watson around. Am I crazy though for thinking that they were undervalued this year?
Let me ask you, the answer to that question is, what do you believe about Bo Nix?
I believe that he can be a distributor, right?
Like that sounds like they're appropriately valued then.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
I don't think he's gonna light the world on fire, but I do think that he can run this system.
I had a strategy with Javonte Williams early this offseason, and I have decided to stick to it. Javonte, everyone was madly in love with him before the injury. He was the young, burgeoning star dynasty. You couldn't acquire him. He was going to be the next big thing. Then he got an injury that was clearly a very, very bad injury. Came back maybe too fast, shockingly fast at the very least. Nobody thought he was going to. And he did not look the same. He didn't have the burst and didn't have the speed. But sometimes it takes 2 years removed from these types of injuries. There is plenty of data to suggest that the second year back from the ACL is better than the first year back from the ACL. And if he's not too old. If he is the pre-injury dude, I mean, everyone wanted him. So that is what we wanted. And so my strategy with Javonte Williams was, I believe there's only two outcomes. The outcome one is after the injury, he's not the same guy. Outcome number two is after 2 years, he goes back to being the same guy. And if he goes back to being the same guy, we will hear non-stop how great he looks in camp. And instead, is he going to make the roster? Yeah. We're not sure. And so I'm out. I just was like, if he is the guy he was last year, he was super involved. And he was the running back 30. He didn't really help you. He got more opportunities than we think. And so I'm hoping, I'm rooting for him. I was a lover of Javonte beforehand. McLaughlin, he's got juice, he's got speed, but I don't see a world where he can be a real difference maker. In the sense that, like, if Javonte goes down, I don't think McLaughlin's getting a full workload. He's not going to be one of those insurance backs that just goes to superstardom. So he's always going to be kind of the bit player, and maybe he'll have the Pirine role that had 50 receptions. You add 50 receptions with juice, maybe you got something. But yeah, I mean, I think if you want to be bullish on those players, you have to be bullish on Bo Nix.
Yeah. I think that's all really, really fair. The stuff with McLaughlin too, and this is where I think fantasy discussion doesn't get deep enough. This is our faults. But it's when we're talking about drafting a guy, not drafting a guy, and not giving it like league context. Yeah. Right. Like a guy like McLaughlin works really well in deeper formats with larger starting lineups because you're just
flex, full PPR. He's got a place. He's going to be one of those pinch starters on a weekly basis. Yeah.
100%. Whereas if you're in a 10-team league where you're starting 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers in a flex, which is, I mean, it's like 90% of leagues at this point, but in those kinds of formats, is McLaughlin really going to, like, why would we take the shot at McLaughlin when, like you said, more than likely the ceiling's not going to be there? I do think that in like a strong season from him, higher range of outcome, we see like a low end RB2 season in PPR, right? Where like things hit the right way from a receiving perspective. We know that he's really efficient, and that's sort of the archetype. Like it's like the Gibbs, Devon Achane, not to their level. He's not as talented as them, but to that level of like how they're scoring fantasy points, right? In the way that they're scoring fantasy points. But in those kinds of formats where you have 10 teams in your league, you're only starting 2 running backs and maybe a flex. To me, is it more like it might be more advantageous to just be like, all right, if I'm going to spend a pick on Jaleel McLaughlin, maybe I should just spend a pick on Braylon Allen or something and just have like the true bell cow upside.
Yeah, I think if you want to, because I agree, if you're talking about a low end RB2 finish, that's in the range of outcomes for him, certainly. And then the question is, based on the league, does that matter? And you just ask yourself this. In your league last year, whatever league is important to you, it's 16 teams, it's 10 teams, was Jaylen Warren valuable? Yeah. If he was, then grab McLaughlin. That's the type. He finishes the running back 25 last year. He was involved. But he's never going to be, that singular dude. And so if he was an irrelevant piece in your league last year, then move on from McLaughlin.
Yeah. And then Javonte, I mean, look, I've said it on the show, like there's obvious variance there, but of the backs in that backfield, he, like you said, he has the most upside. Like there's no doubt that he would have, because Audric Estime, profiled more as an early down guy. They even said that when they drafted him.
Over, first and second down back. That's all. That's all Peyton would say. I see him as a first and second down back. It's like, okay.
Right. So all right, we don't need to really worry about that much from a fantasy perspective, right? But he's younger. Like, he was only like 20 and a half years old or something coming out. So like, he can obviously grow into a little bit of a role there.
Yeah. I know Mike is more in on Javonte. I hope it works, man. I really do. I don't have any shares of him. I doubt I have one in any of my main leagues, and I'll still be rooting for him because the world needs a healthy Javonte.
Yeah, agreed. I made some stupid trades when he was ascending in Dynasty a couple years ago.
Oh yeah. Oh, I got out. I got bailed out. I got rejected because I was trying. Nice. I was trying to get my hands on him.
Yeah, I definitely made some dumb ones, but that's what happens sometimes. All right, one guy who's playing on Friday, because we have a Friday game this week, Josh Jacobs, who, look, complete transparency, early in the offseason, I thought he was a total fade at ADP because of the way that Matt LaFleur has traditionally split his backfields. They go out and they draft Marshawn Lloyd. There was also some talk that LaFleur thought that they were going to have both Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones on that roster, which they did for like a minute. And then they got rid of Aaron Jones, which tells me that, that might be philosophically what they want to do. But I mean, has anyone run purer than Josh Jacobs from a fantasy perspective this summer? It's like, you lose Marshawn Lloyd to that injury. AJ Dillon's out for the year. Now he's competing with not a whole lot in that backfield. Marshawn Lloyd is iffy for this week. I've obviously adjusted because you have to adjust with new information. But where are you at with Josh Jacobs? He's someone that I always want to get different angles on because I just have not figured out what to do with him all summer.
I'm so pissed off about Josh Jacobs. I'm like, he is so upsetting because I was 100% with you if you were out on Josh Jacobs at ADP. I spent the whole season, the whole offseason talking about how, look, he was inefficient last year.
Yeah.
And now LaFleur wants a committee. He wants it. He needs it. Every interview, every press conference about the running backs, he doesn't just say, that's what I believe. He says, you guys know me. I believe in the system. You know me. He's like, this is who I am.
It's like in my body. Yes.
Yeah, it's in my body. He wants multiple backs. He thinks it's better. He thinks it keeps him fresh. If that's what you believe, that's what you're going to do. He doesn't want him to be a workhorse. Right. And so bringing in Lloyd, having A.J. Dillon involved early the offseason and everything, I was like, no, I'll take my L. I'll be wrong on Josh Jacobs, but I'm not grabbing him in his value. And now, son of a gun, he is going to be a workhorse to start the season.
He is.
Everyone, even Emmanuel Wilson, who was like, he's hurt right now. Most people a month ago didn't even know who Emmanuel Wilson was, and now he's important, and now he's gone. It's like you don't have a choice. You can't do a committee if you only have one running back. You have one running back.
Yeah.
I will say this: the answer to the question earlier of what do people make mistakes on, what I wanted to answer, and Josh Jacobs is the reason I didn't, is the late changes. Oh my gosh, they always suck. They're always wrong. Last year, there were two examples of guys that just, at the very end, I'm like, I changed. One of them was Javonte. I was OUT because he was injured. But this was not an easy injury. This was a really bad knee injury. It wasn't like Brees's. And so it was like, I was out. He's not going to be ready. He's going to be on the pup. What? He's not going to be on the pup? What? He's playing a preseason? I guess he's superhuman. And then at the very end, right when drafts are going, it's like, okay, I'm in on Javonte. And it's like, L.
Yeah.
And then, gosh, who was it? There was someone else that was like, I was out. Oh, gosh. Dameon Pierce. I was so out on Dameon Pierce the whole offseason. Just talking about fourth rounders, how it's easy. If he doesn't do good, they move on from him. Yep. He's not really as talented as some of the metrics say. I mean, I was just totally out on him. And then preseason rolls around. It seems like he's the dude. He got every snap in preseason with the passing downs and with the starters. It's like, okay, I guess I'll change. It's like L. And so right now, this is kind of how I am on Kyron. Like Kyron got the news of, he's going to return punts. The world freaked out.
Yeah.
And I'm not changing. I'm not. I'm saying, look, this isn't actually new information. Mm-hmm. Nothing new happened in the team.
Correct.
Okay, it got announced that he's the punt returner, but
yes.
They probably knew that the whole time.
Right.
Like this is not new. If you believe he's good and he's the guy, which I do, I'm not going to change.
Right.
But with Josh Jacobs, I feel like I have to change. I mean, it's not opinion that it's not like they don't have other running backs to put the hand on the ball. Like,
right.
So he's going to get work. It's a good offense. I believe in the offensive system. So yeah, I'm in on Josh Jacobs. I am rooting against him.
Yeah, I've obviously, like, what was really strange is that every time I do my weekly rankings, I like to just afterwards compare them to consensus because I want to see who I seem to be higher or lower on that week. Jacobs is still ranked like lower than I expect, just based on the environment right now, right? He was ranked lower than I expected. Like, I'm like 4 or 5 running back spots higher with Jacobs this week than what consensus is saying, which I was shocked by because it seems like most people were rightfully towards the end of August ranking Jacobs as like that in that like low end RB1 range because of all the injuries and stuff that were going happening around him. But like if Marshawn Lloyd never suffered the injury that he suffered, and look, he might even go this week, but if Marshawn Lloyd never suffered that injury, would you just be full blown fade city with Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, more so for sure. But it was the combo of AJ Dillon and Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah,
it's like the fact that your second back and your third back and now your fourth back are currently injured. Yeah. You have one back, so yeah, it sucks, and it sucks because now I'm rooting against him. Like I want him to fail, and I don't enjoy it. Like I'm not that type. I don't want to root against.
Right, it's the worst part of our jobs. Yeah.
Right, yeah, I'm never. But I know in my heart. In my heart, I'm gonna watch, and when he does something good, I'm gonna go, darn it.
Yeah,
because I'm begrudgingly in.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a weird world.
It is strange. Another guy that I bring up on basically every show because I think that he is just an interesting case is Zamir White. Are you in or out on Zamir White this year?
I'm out on Zamir White.
Okay.
It's hard. He certainly has the job, and I think he could get off to a decently hot start. They've got a good defense, and it's been made clear more recently that Alexander Mattison is a backup. He's not in there to run a timeshare. Obviously, they're willing to give a guy a big workload, including Zamir last year when Jacobs was out. So there's a million ways you can look at him being such a good value where he's going in drafts as a real starter. He's the starting running back. But I'm just going to bet on the side of history and analytics. Like, you don't break out after that many years. You don't do it for a bad offense. Where he's going in drafts is usually a bad sign. It's just kind of like, I don't know how it's not going to work for Zamir White, but I know it's not going to work for Zamir White. Like at the end next year, Zamir White's not getting a big bag of money and going to be a hot draft pick.
Yeah.
And so it's like I'm just going to avoid it. And if he starts hot, whatever. But at some point, I think the team is going to struggle. I don't see them as, some Super Bowl contender. And when you don't have a lot invested in him, which they don't, he's not their future. He's not their current. He's their current just because like he wasn't their plan. Mm-hmm. They just kind of got backed into it. And whenever those things happen, a la Alexander Mattison last year, it just finds a way to not work.
He feels like the Madison of this year, does he not?
Yeah, I mean, we were saying that before Madison went there, and then Madison went, and it was like, wow, okay, double Madison.
Yeah, it does seem that way. And the other thing, too, Coach Speak Index does great work in putting video content out there for us of interviews and stuff and what coaches are saying. And one of them recently was Antonio Pierce talking about Zamir White getting basically all of the early down work. He was saying, Zamir White is the early down guy. I can't remember the exact quote, but along those lines, Zamir White's the early down guy. The thing, and people ran with it and they're very excited about it. But to me, it was kind of an interesting quote because he's specifying the early downs. He's not talking about him as a 3-down back, as a pass catcher, when we knew that he was going to be their early down guy. Like that really hasn't been the question mark. That's really
an Amir Abdullah tweet or a quote. Right? All of a sudden Amir Abdullah is going to be on the field all the time, taking the valuable touches away.
Right. So that's my fear and has been my fear literally throughout college. Was not a pass catcher. Obviously Josh.
So you're out on Zamir?
I'm out. I've been pretty far out on Zamir. Yeah. And you look at that him in the NFL, even the stretch last year, the final month of the season where he was a beast on the ground. The Raiders also had some funky game scripts, number one. But number two, his target share per game rate was still under 10%. Like it wasn't some monster number that we can, feel really bullish about, entering this year. So my thing with White has been, am I going to be shocked that, if he's RB22 drafted, if he finishes his RB17? No, but I want my RB22s to have legit RB1 upside. I just don't think that that's in Zamir White's range of outcomes right now.
I don't either. No.
Yeah. Maybe we'll both have egg on our face at the end of the year. But this is the kind of bet that probability wise that you should be making. I think
that's what it is. It's really, certain bets have enough data to make the probability high or low. And this one just feels like narrative wise, it should work.
Yeah.
But probability wise, when you look at just historical data points of things that fail, he's got a lot of them.
He's got a lot. There's been that ADP cluster with these rookie wide receivers this year where you have every draft seems different too in the way that they handle the rookie wide receivers. You got Roma Dunze, you had my MVP that I threw out on your show, and Brian Thomas. You have Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey. Of that group, who are you most afraid of? And then of that group, who do you think was the best value in drafts this year?
I'm most afraid of Roma Dunze.
Okay.
You talk about historical data points, and I know we've never seen a Caleb Williams before.
Yeah.
But rookie quarterbacks don't generally throw a bunch of touchdowns. That's just true. They even when they have great seasons, it's rare for them to throw a really fantasy relevant number of passing touchdowns. And so if you've got 22, 24, 25 passing touchdowns going there, he seems like he's going to play this season as the wide receiver 3 for that team. And then you've got another red zone option in Cole Kmet there. So I worry because he's the highest drafted one usually in most of the drafts that I've seen.
Yeah.
He's the highest drafted of that group, and I feel like he's got a lot of flags against him. My favorite of that group is one of the lower drafted ones. It's Ladd McConkey.
Mm-hmm.
I love the film. I forgive the production profile from Georgia and just barely being outside of the metrics that you want to hit.
Yeah.
But I believe he fits the system perfectly with Herbert. You watched, obviously Keenan Allen's a GOAT, but you watched Keenan Allen dominate last year because he's in sync with Herbert. He knows where he's going to be on this step, and he's going to be in the right spot, and he's going to catch the ball when it goes there. And that's the type of player that I think Ladd is. All through training camp, whenever there were open media access practices, I would just always see the target numbers of this drive. It was always Ladd McConkey was like his early target. And you talk about opportunity. Okay, so you compare Odunze is a better wide receiver than Ladd McConkey. That's why he went higher in the draft. But Odunze has to compete with DJ Moore and has to compete with Keenan Allen with a rookie quarterback that might not in his rookie season throw a lot of touchdowns. On the flip side, you have Ladd McConkey who has Justin Herbert as a vet, as a pro, with no competition. Palmer, Quentin Johnston, these are who he's competing against. So, he has a clearer path to be the one for his team for a quarterback who has a clearer path to throw more touchdowns or be, better in the NFL this season. So, those are my two kind of opposite rookie takes in that group.
Does the Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh effect scare you a little bit with the Chargers offense?
So, it does in general. Mm-hmm. But it's baked in. I feel like the Greg Roman, G-Ro, he's already I think Herbert and Ladd and even Palmer, I think these guys are undervalued right now in drafts because you just assume, well, they're only going to run the ball. No, they're not. They're an NFL offense. Yes, they want to run the ball more. They are going to run the ball more. You're not going to see Justin Herbert throwing 700 times the way that, it's been. But his efficiency is good. They're still an NFL team whose goal is to score points, and they still have Justin Herbert behind center. So I think it's overblown. To speak to Justin Herbert, I think he could be a surprisingly decent value at the end of the year. One of those guys, you look back and you go, oh, yeah, we just thought Justin Herbert was going to suck because he had, Harbaugh come in. It turns out Justin Herbert's a great quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing, if you look at Greg Roman's history and what we're basing a lot of the analysis off of, it's been Colin Kaepernick, Tyrod Taylor, and Lamar Jackson, which is not Justin Herbert. That is not the archetype of Justin Herbert. Now, do I think that range of outcomes wise, they could be really, really run heavy? Sure. But I do think, to your point, that this could go in the opposite direction that people think as well. Like they don't have to be some ground and pound team automatically as heavy as of a run heavy team as a lot are assuming. So that makes a lot of sense. All right, I have two more questions for you before we go. The first one is, this is one that everyone always asks before week one. So assuming injuries aside, injuries are going to happen, unfortunately, and probably the top waiver wire ad next week for week 2 is going to be based off of some sort of injury that occurred. Yeah. But, last year we had Puka Nacua. Last year we had even Kyron Williams. So based on talent, based on situation, based on the week 1 matchup, is there a player, and you can give multiple names if you want to as well, is there a player who you think is going to be at the top of our waiver priorities entering week 2?
Kind of following that Puka, I think a lot of times you have a rookie wide receiver who wasn't drafted who gets surprising opportunity. And if I had to take my shot at some names there on the waiver wire, I think Luke McCaffrey, who came out as a starter. We haven't seen Jaden Daniels yet, and I think he's actually a pretty good football player. He could be there. Roman Wilson, if he is healthy and is actually involved in the offense. I loved Roman Wilson. I mean, I just think he's a rock solid wide receiver. That's who the Steelers always draft anyways. He's got the opportunity there. And Malik Washington fits, I think, the system in Miami. And then based on matchup, if you want to go running back, I'll throw out Ray Davis. Gets to play the Cardinals, high over under, high, win total. There, the Bills are going to destroy the Cardinals. And I think there could be some, multi-touchdown Ray Davis week 1 outcomes in the multiverse.
Yeah, I love all of those picks. Those are really good call-outs. All right, last one. Give me a bold take for this season.
All right. This year's CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, who won people championships last year because of CeeDee leveling up and because of the schedule opening up, where good run defenses, terrible pass defenses. We kind of saw some of this coming. We talked about it midway through the season on our show. This year's version of that is Kirk Cousins and Drake London. You need that level up from the wide receiver. I think Drake London, we've all seen the talent and wondered if it could be. If he levels up, if he can take that step forward and show, like, look, I'm one of the dominating wide receivers out here on the field like I was drafted to be, if he does, and Kirk Cousins is healthy, they're scheduled down the stretch. The number one, they've got a bye week, I think, around week – it's really late. It's like week 11 or 12, I think. I think it's week 12. And from the rest of the season all the way through the fantasy playoffs, they play just some juicy matchups, bad secondaries. And so if those two things click, like if Kirk is healthy and Drake London is who he was drafted to be, then they will ignite fire in the playoffs. I don't usually spend too much credence on strength of schedule for playoff weeks, because defenses are so different by the time we get there. But I've just been eyeballing that. I think the match, it's just one of those things where Drake London scares me a little bit when I'm drafting him. I'm not like super over the top bullish, but you can see the path for how it really works out. And so I guess my rankings wise, I am the highest of the three of us on Drake. I think Kirk Cousins is a very good quarterback.
Yeah, I like that call out a lot. He's been someone that I've mistakenly touted last year as a decent target. I just think the talent is just undeniable with London. So I like that sort of connection to a CeeDee Lamb type breakout. With the quarterback upgrade. Jason, though, man, it was great to sit down and chat. Everyone obviously already probably listening to the Fantasy Footballers, but let everyone know where they can find you.
The Fantasy Footballers, and wherever you use Google, you can find us. But it's always a pleasure. Really nice to catch up, man. Don't let it go another half a decade, okay?
Yeah. Look. I told you.
It's your fault. Yeah, we agree.
Right. Sure. We'll find a place. Maybe we'll just fly to somewhere in the middle of America and just have a late round Fantasy Footballers meetup.
Sounds great. Let's go to go to Kansas.
Kansas
Wait,
is the next destination, next off season.
Where's Kentucky? Is that central enough? Central enough?
It's closer for me, so sure. All right, I'll make that happen.
I want to visit Kentucky.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, go to whiskey country.
Yeah, let's do it, man. As always, you can find all my stuff over on lateround.com. Make sure you're subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. But otherwise, everyone, enjoy week 1. And as always, thanks for tuning in.